What is science fiction? What makes something science fiction? What is good science fiction or bad science fiction? The answers to those questions are what we're going to explore in this video. To answer, basically, there are two things that science fiction does. Number one, science fiction explores themes in relation to science and technology. If you take out the science and the technology, it can just be a regular story, but it uses science and technology to explore specific themes. Number two, it uses science and technology to explore both contemporary and timeless issues or themes, right? But issues and themes are not necessarily the same thing. Let's look at themes just a bit for a second. In my class, we've defined theme as a universal human experience that is explored through the specific details in a text. So even though you might not be able to relate to the specific details like the setting or the lives of the characters or even the events that happen to them, especially that particular plot, you might be able to relate to the experiences they have, right? Now, let's talk about the word contemporary. That means it's existing and relevant today. So today in the United States of America, immigration is a very contemporary issue, right? People care a lot about who's allowed to come into the country, who's not, who's being sent out of the country. I'm recording this in 2025. And so it's a very, very big issue in contemporary culture. Now, it has always been an issue in all countries across all time, so it's also a timeless issue, meaning it doesn't just depend on right now. It's existing and it's relevant forever. Things like justice, things like government, things like that are timeless. A more contemporary issue would be something like internet censorship, right? In the past, they didn't have the internet, so they didn't have to deal with censorship in the internet. In fact, censorship in general might not have been a timeless issue because there were times when people couldn't really read and write in a widespread way, and so it wasn't really something that they had to worry about because they just had to keep people illiterate. But is that censorship? Maybe it is. Anyways, these are the two key things that science fiction does. Let's explore theme a little bit, okay? Science fiction explores themes in relation to science and technology, these universal experiences that anybody can relate to, even if they can't relate to the specifics, okay? So what science fiction will do, it'll take any theme in the world and it will basically add science things to it, okay? So if we take a theme like compassion, right? You could read a book that takes place in World War II, where you don't know what it's like to be running from invading Germans or fleeing or standing up to Nazis or anything like that. You don't know what those things are like. You haven't had to do that. But the people in that story need compassion. So it's a theme that you can relate to. That's what makes it a theme. It's universal. But a sci-fi story would say, well, how does compassion change when we add AI? If we have artificial forms of intelligence, is compassion the same? Is it different? How does it change? What does compassion look like when AI enters the scene? Okay. How about personhood? If we're defining who's a person, if they have to be, self-aware or have emotions, or how do you define what makes a person? And how does that change when we add certain science or technology like AI? How about robots instead? How about robots when robots can have emotions or maybe artificial emotions? Okay. How about language and intergalactic travel? Once we can go into other planets with other life forms, does language need to change? Do we need to have a literally universal language instead of a universal that's actually just global language? How does that change? What would that be like? It can explore something universal to humans that everyone can experience and everyone can understand and everyone can relate to, with this other technology, to say how would it change and how do we understand humans and human nature when this other technology comes in? How about colonization? How about a whole new planet? How about time travel? How about any new technology? How would that affect the way that we understand what resilience is? How would it help us define who our family is? How would it affect social classes? How would morality change in human beings with this new technology? Okay. Let's look at the other side of this coin. It uses science and technology to explore contemporary or timeless issues. We're going to talk about the movie WALL-E to explore this. Now, WALL-E is, I think, an exceptional piece of science fiction. Okay, it deals with things like pollution, capitalism, laziness, control, things like that. Those are some key issues that are explored in Wall-E, because it says, what would humanity do in this situation as we relate to those themes? Okay, so pollution. I mean, the whole movie, it starts out where Earth is just covered in trash, and Wall-E is a robot who cleans up the trash so that Earth can be habitable again, or inhabitable, and humanity can come back to Earth because they've all left. Okay, or capitalism, right? The capitalism in Wall-E is this company, by and large, that produces all of the trash that is polluted all over the world, but they're the ones who also took everyone up into space and said, we got to get out of here. And now everyone's living on this, by and large, ship, basically in a life of pure capitalism, and it's just running their lives. And this screenshot, of course, is the all daycare, where they're saying, you know what, all day your kids are going to come here, and what are we going to feed them? By and large, we're going to feed them our company, because we want to get them as young as possible to love our company and our products. Or laziness, right? On this big ship where everyone lives, sorry if I've ruined the movie, but Wall-E makes it onto the ship from the Earth, but these people sit in these chairs and they have these screens in front of their face, and it's just entertainment all the time from by and large, and they become so lazy, they become these pudgy, fat, round people who can't even walk, right? Everyone's extremely overweight, and that's part of this exploration of what would humanity do in this situation. It doesn't look so good if the Pixar people are right. Or control, right? When by and large gives you everything you need, they then control you, and they say, you know what? We're not going back to Earth. We're going to stay out here. The intention was never to go back to Earth. The intention was for us to give you everything you need so that you can't escape us, and you're going to buy what we're selling nonstop forever because we control you. So these are all contemporary issues. Pollution in the world, capitalism, laziness, control by the government or the capitalistic companies or whoever it is, right? These are all very relevant issues today, and they're unique in the way that our lives happen today. But they're also timeless issues. Capitalism, maybe not so much, because it some would say that that's a recent invention. But the other ones, how we treat the environment. Do we take care of the nature around us? Are we lazy or are we responsible? Do we take care of ourselves? What happens when the government tries to control everything in our lives? These are contemporary issues and timeless issues. Okay, so that's what makes Wall-E some good sci-fi. We'll look at another example. It's a comic strip called Strange Planet. And instead of science and technology, it uses aliens to, in a way, ask questions about what human behavior is really like and interrogate it, if you will. So here's one of the best Strange Planet comics. This alien is saying, "Ha, you enjoy pretending you're a mighty hunter." Saying that to its cat as it points a laser pointer at the couch. Now you'll notice that it's also holding a video game controller. So he's saying, you enjoy pretending you're a mighty hunter. It's laughing at this cat, when it is just a simulation with blinking lights, right? Saying, you stupid cat, you don't understand that this is fake. You just want to feel like you're hunting, even though it's not real. You're so dumb. What a funny cat. Turns back to his video game. And then, of course, his TV turns on, and everything is red, same color as that laser pointer was in the beginning. And so what this does is it points out a piece of human behavior where we say, oh, cats are so funny, they just chase this thing like it's real. But then we spend hours and hours playing video games pretending that we're soldiers or hunters or whatever it is, even though it's just a simulation with blinking lights. And this is part of what made the earlier comics in the Strange Planet series good sci-fi, because they actually pointed to something about humanity that might be too close for us to realize. And that's what good sci-fi does. It says, let's use this technology to step out of our current reality, step into another reality so that things feel a little more unfamiliar, and we can kind of poke holes in the things that are a little too close for us to see right now. Let's look at another one. Again, with cats. The best Strange Planet ones have to do with cats. The alien says it has freedom to explore this entire space, yet prefers the confines of a tiny box. And the frame has shrunk there for some reason. Inexplicable, says the other alien. What a curious creature. So again, they don't understand the cat. This cat doesn't make any sense to them. But what the author, Nathan W. Pyle, as it says in his bottom right corner, what he's pointing out is we humans have the freedom to explore the entire space of the world, right? And you can see it in this final frame with the mountains and the sunset or maybe the moon, and you've got all this space, and yet it prefers the confines of a tiny apartment in a big building, right? This cat is weird because it just wants to be in the box when it has the whole house to be in. And so this is what makes it interesting sci-fi, is it's bringing us to another environment in order to explain or explore something that's in our environment with a more critical lens. Okay, this is what makes good sci-fi. So sci-fi uses technology to explore contemporary or timeless issues. And it's not always contemporary. It's not always technology or science. Sometimes it's aliens. Sometimes sci-fi just uses aliens to explore contemporary or timeless issues. Strange Planet does this. Many things do this. Now, I'd recommend you pause this video and read Neil Gaiman's Introduction to Fahrenheit 451. That's in the 60th anniversary edition of Fahrenheit 451. The cover where there's like a matchbox coming out of a book. That red cover. It's really cool. Okay, so I'll give you a moment to pause, go find this. You can find a PDF online. Maybe if you own a copy, you can just crack it open. But go and read that. Welcome back. In Neil Gaiman's Introduction to Fahrenheit 451, he said that a lot of the good speculative fiction starts with these kinds of sentences. Someone asks, what if this were to happen? What if this were to become possible? They say, if only, and so they imagine something that we can't do yet, but if only, this were the case. Or tales of warning, like Fahrenheit 451, say, if this goes on, we might be in this situation. If the way things are doesn't change, we might end up here or there. So those are the kinds of questions, right? And so let's go in our imagination to some of these sentences. What if the electrical currents that make our muscles move, because that's what makes your muscles move, is little electrical signals, what if those were passed through a dead body to try and make it, quote unquote, alive and moving again? Is that even possible? Some would say that that is actually the first science fiction story. That is Frankenstein, okay? Frankenstein itself explores that very issue. And so it's saying when people were discovering galvanism, right, they were saying, well, could we just electrocute a dead body and see what happens? And that's kind of the sci-fi element that then explores parts of human nature in Frankenstein. So the science is galvanism. The theme is personhood. How do we define who's a person who deserves dignity and respect? And that is a timeless issue, right? Personhood is a timeless issue, a timeless theme. How about this? If only scientists could clone fossilized dinosaur DNA and bring them back to life. This one might be obvious. It's Jurassic Park. Man, that shot still gets me. That scene is so intense. But the science is cloning, right? Cloning from basic DNA, right? The theme is risky science. And that is a contemporary issue, right? You might say, people wanted to do social experiments or experiments on people's will or whatever before we had the kind of science we have today. But when someone wants to do an experiment that puts people at risk and they care more about the knowledge and the scientific understanding than they do about the lives of people, what is that like? That's what Jurassic Park really is exploring, and that is a contemporary issue. If this continues, totalitarian governments will use constant surveillance and propaganda to control every aspect of people's lives. Now, if you've read this book, it's my favorite book, 1984. The science is telescreens, and when the author George Orwell wrote it, television, phones, things like that were just being invented in the 1940s. And so he says, what if there are two-way telescreens that are just always on? You can't turn them off. The theme is government control, which is an issue that is timeless. What if the government tries to control people and take over their lives, and this science helps them do so? What do we need to be aware of and think about before that becomes a reality? Now, 1984 is in the category of dystopia. You could call this a subgenre of science fiction, a subgenre of speculative fiction. Dys means bad, topia means place. Put them together and it means bad place. So a dystopia novel or a dystopian novel is a story about a bad place, a world where everything has gone bad. In 1984, the government is super oppressive, exceptionally evil and cunning and tricky, and they're just there's awful. It's very bad, right? Bad place. And so keep this in mind. Not all dystopia is science fiction, but most dystopia has science fiction elements to it. Let's continue. If this continues, a future society may make books illegal to suppress knowledge and control its citizens. Okay. Fahrenheit 451. We read this in my class, so if you're one of my students, you should have caught on to this really quickly. The silence, of course, is the parlor walls. Not, of course, there are several in here. The parlor walls, where the whole entire living room, every wall is just a wall-sized TV. And the theme is naivety. People are books are illegal, but it's because people didn't want books. They're like, we don't need them. So they're naive. They don't understand anything. So they spend their days just staring at these big wall TVs. And that is a timeless issue. So they're taking this future science and exploring a present and timeless past issue. It's like, do you know what's going on? Are you just naive to everything? Are you choosing to be naive? Okay. Or how about the science being robot dogs, right? And the theme is government control. You could also pair that with resistance to that government control, right? And the robot dog is this symbol of total control and suppression of everything in the citizens, right? And that is also a timeless issue. How do you resist against the control of the government when they have power you don't have? Maybe not a robot dog, but some kind of power. How about another one? Fireproof houses, right? And the theme is the suppression of knowledge, where they say nothing is destructible, right? Everything is happy and fine and safe. Even your house is never going to catch on fire. But the one thing that we will do is burn down this seemingly indestructible house if you choose to try and pursue knowledge from these books, right? And that is a very contemporary issue, right? Suppression of knowledge. You could argue that it's also a timeless issue, and people were trying to keep their population illiterate or just keep them naive to certain things. But they use these technologies in this world, and Fahrenheit 451 is hard to pin down direct relationships between one science, one theme, and one issue. It's really everything in the whole world working together to explore a handful of themes that are both contemporary and timeless, which is what makes Fahrenheit 451 such a good story, I think. Now, it's an example of a utopia, right? U meaning good, and topia still meaning place. Utopia is then a good place because in this world, everyone is happy. If you have an issue, you take some pills to get rid of your bad, sad feelings. If there's something wrong, you just go smash something at this park where you can smash stuff. You just get in the car and drive 120 miles an hour and hit animals out on the highways, and you feel great. Okay, you just turn on the TV and you numb yourself. So basically everyone's living as if there are no problems and nothing's really bad, and everything is good. Interestingly, almost all utopia stories are dystopias behind that utopian facade, right? We'll look at this in another way, right? What if the government made children fight to the death to decide which groups of people were fed and which weren't, right? That's an oppressive government. That is the Hunger Games, right? If you're familiar with the series, you probably saw this one right away as soon as I put that question up. But the science in there is this arena. Okay, you could also say that it's like aestheticism gone wild because everyone can get gold skin, green skin, all this stuff, and it seems like a utopia in the capital. But behind the scenes is this dystopia where there are all these super poor people, right? The theme is government control. It could also be, human cruelty. And that is a timeless issue, government control. And so they step out into this utopia, there's a dystopia behind it, as most utopias are, to explore these key issues. What if the government controlled people's lives, the truth, and everyone's behavior, but they let one person in society know the truth and experience a full life with the pain and the badness and everything that they're not letting anyone else experience? This is The Giver. Most of you read this in middle school. Of course, the science is where you can share memories, right? Someone's able to just take this memory from the past and just put it in someone's head so that they remember it. And the theme there is the value of pain, because pain can be valuable. You can understand the world and people and yourself and a lot of things better with negative experiences than just living in this weird utopia of naivety. And that is the universal theme, so that in all time, that should say timeless, not universal. All themes are universal, but it's a timeless issue where understanding, I'm going to splice this together. Hold on. And that is a timeless issue. that even the negative parts of your life still give you something valuable, something worth knowing and understanding. So let's go back to the reality and stop these imaginings for a moment. Let's talk about bad and good science fiction, because some science fiction out there is good, it's high quality, and some is bad. It kind of passes as science fiction, but it's not actually helping anybody out. C.S. Lewis wrote an article called On Science Fiction, because he was alive right when science fiction was kind of starting out. And here's what he says. He categorizes some sci-fi as radically bad. He says that radically bad science fiction contains stories where the author leaps forward into an imagined future when planetary, sidereal, or even galactic travel has become common. Against this huge backcloth, he then proceeds to develop an ordinary love story, spy story, wreck story, or crime story, to cite a few examples. This seems to me tasteless. Whatever in a work of art is not used is doing harm. The faintly imagined and sometimes strictly unimaginable scene and properties only blur the real theme and distract us from any interest it might have had. Okay, I think he's right. I think that when you jump into the future and you just tell a regular story in this other world, but it's not really using the otherworldly things in order to enhance the story, then it is kind of doing harm, and it's a distraction. Okay, so here's another example of Strange Planet. We've got an alien in bed saying, "One last hydration cylinder," and then an alien peeking into the frame saying, "Okay," holding a glass of milk or water or something. "Ingest it now," says the alien on the left, while the alien on the right starts to drink it. "Please keep the corridor illuminated," says the alien. Okay, so it seems like it's a parent alien and a child alien asking for some water and saying, "Keep the hallway light on." "Imagine pleasant nonsense." Okay. Now, what's a shame is that Strange Planet as a comic series has really gotten to become more like these, where the aliens really have nothing to do with it. The way they talk, of course, even in the originals, was very scientific and not the way humans talk, right? One last hydration cylinder. Instead of glass of water, it's a cylinder of hydration, right? Ingest it now. No one says ingest. They just say drink. Come on, here, drink it. Please keep the corridor illuminated, which is just highly technical of saying keep the hallway light on, right? Imagine pleasant nonsense instead of sweet dreams. But it's not actually pointing out anything about humanity. It's not pointing out any kind of relatable theme. There's nothing really to go on here. This isn't a funny comic, even if it were cowboys, right? You know, a cowboy with his child. "One more glass of water?" "Yeah, here you go. Drink it quickly. Can you keep the hallway light on?" "Yeah, sweet dreams." Okay, like this isn't funny, and making aliens do it doesn't make it funny, right? Because your formal alien language isn't what makes your comics funny and valuable, right? So the science here, if you can call it science, is aliens. The theme, who knows? The issue, I don't know, having a glass of water before bed and having a hallway with a light on, that might be contemporary because, you know, hallways with lights are a recent invention. I don't know. But it's definitely, it's not like it used to be, where it really interrogated human nature in an interesting way. Let's look at another one. "I found an animal we can sit on," says one alien. The other alien says, "We can sit on most animals." Right away, this is funny, but the aliens have nothing to do with it. "While it runs." "Sit running, sit running." "I have named the creature Inclement Weather." Marvelous. Now this is funny, but the aliens serve no purpose. You could have the exact same comic with contemporary people, or again, with cowboys, or with scientists, you know, whatever, human scientists, or with animals. Sure, I mean, maybe not if it's about animals, but someone says, "I found an animal we can sit on." We can sit on most animals. That's already a funny interaction. "Oh, an animal we can sit on while it runs." "Oh, sit running." It's like, oh, that is a funny concept. Sit running, like sit while it runs. That's cool. I named it after inclement weather. I'm going to name it storm or thunder or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. Okay, it's funny, right? It's funny that that they would call it sit running. And this concept seems amusing when you step out of it for a minute. And so the aliens don't really offer anything. Just showing the origin of riding on a horse brings us out of our familiarity with horse riding enough to kind of show us how odd the concept is, but the aliens doing it doesn't really do anything. The reason it's aliens is because it was already a popular comic, and he's not going to change it up now. So science, aliens, themes, I don't know, issue, who knows. Sure, it's funny, but whatever doesn't add to a piece of art takes away from it. Sorry, Nathan W. Pyle. After all that look at bad sci-fi, let's talk about good sci-fi. What makes good sci-fi? I would say that good sci-fi is just good literature that's also science fiction. So that raises the question, what makes good literature? If good sci-fi is just good literature that's also sci-fi. Okay. And to answer that question, we're going to turn to Faber from Fahrenheit 451. Here's what he says on page 77 of the 60th anniversary edition. What does the word quality mean? To me, it means texture. This book has pores. It has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past an infinite profusion. The more pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. That's my definition anyway. Telling detail, fresh detail. The good writers touch life often. Right? Now, Faber isn't talking about science fiction. He's just talking about literature. He's saying good writers touch life often. So in other words, good literature accurately depicts the way that people are, whether the situations are realistic or not. If people were put into certain situations, here's what they would probably do. And if you know what people are like, you'll be able to tell this is right. But there are some books you read or movies you watch where you say, nobody acts like this. This is just bad writing, bad literature. This has nothing to offer anybody. So good sci-fi then accurately explores the way people would be, not the way they are, but the way they would be with technology or situations that we can only imagine right now. That's what makes good sci-fi. So when we come to write science fiction, how do we do it? We can start with technology, right? Saying, what if this technology existed? You know, space, aliens, certain computers, like whatever it is. And we say, okay, we got this technology. What kind of themes would that technology affect, right? If we have this technology, how would it affect compassion? And then we write a story based on it. We can also go the other way where we say, I want to really explore how humans manipulate each other. So maybe the theme is manipulation, and you move from theme to say, well, what technology would create more opportunities to manipulate others, right? The Divergent series, if you're a young adult who reads dystopia, the Divergent series is great. Dystopian science fiction that explores this manipulation with certain technologies idea. Okay. The other way you can go is you say, well, I got this cool technology, and what kind of issues would come out with this technology, right? And also, if I say, well, I want to explore this issue, it's a contemporary issue that's relevant in my world right now. Okay, I want to explore that. But how would that be explored with certain technologies? So regardless of where you start, if you start with technology, start with the theme, start with the issue, whatever it is, good science fiction will have this universal theme, a contemporary or timeless issue, and it will use technology, that's the biggest part, to explore it. So you take away the technology and it's no longer science fiction, it's just fiction, right? You've got this human universal theme, and you've got these issues that are contemporary or timeless, and you just write about them. That could take place in a present-day novel, a historical novel, in the Victorian era. It could be anything. But the technology, you keep the technology in there that affects the theme and the issues, and that is what makes it into good sci-fi, because it applies to human life, it explores what humans would do in certain situations with certain technologies or new sciences. Okay? So, for your story, an easy place to begin is you just say, what if? And continue. If only. What do you long to see? If this goes on, what seems dangerous to you? You start with those sentences, and then you continue by saying, humanity might do what? And from there, you begin your story. Humanity might do this or become that. And once you start exploring that, that's when you start to create good science fiction.